Hey, it's Pete. In one of my videos recently, or about to go up, I mentioned I might be losing internet, and I did not lose internet. So I've got a few more videos coming up talking about what I'm doing in September. So I thought I'd do a quick wrap up here of my thoughts and recollections of Garbaugust and August reading in general. First of all, I just read one more Garbaugust book, or at least I've read half of it, by David Rabe, two softcore porn novels, as they were called back then. You might read these and not even know. I guess you'd assume they're supposed to be erotic. There's nothing really remarkable about them. I just want to talk about Peter Rabe a bit. I think I called him David Rabe a second ago. These are the type of books. There's a foreword by. Actually, there's a couple afterwords for each story in here. Can you hear that? I thought I'd try and sit out here on the patio during the rain. I don't think you can see the rain. You could probably hear it, and I'm sure you hear that thunder. Anyway, Peter Rabe was a very interesting writer. I've only read one other book by him, and I loved it. There's a couple others I have. This is a classic that he wrote. This is one of the strangest openings for any crime mystery, gangster book I've ever read. What happens is a steamer shows up. Can't even remember. I read this about a year ago. I think I've talked about it before too. But a steamer pulls up in an out-of-the-way place. I think maybe halfway around the world. Let's say, someplace in Africa. There is a very important crate on it that's being sent to around the world, back to the United States, from New York back to California, something like that. It breaks open, or it gets damaged, so they take it off the boat. And what do they find inside? A person. There's a man inside. He's a mob lawyer who displeased his boss, and as his punishment, he was thrown into the crate, nailed in there with like some dog food or sardines or something like that. Food, to prolong his torture, but with the clear intent that he would be long dead before the crate returned. However, he isn't dead. This creates some interesting problems. The local mob, he gets involved with the local mob. He has a chance now to redeem himself with his boss, since he ends up being alive. When his boss back in the States is informed of this, he's like, okay, well, you can do this and this and this for me. So it's a really good novel. I recommend it highly. These that I'm just talking about, these porn novels, softcore erotica, whatever they're called. This was in the early 60s. He wrote these under a pen name. Pen name's pretty funny. If I can find it, it's really not important, but it is funny to see the pen name he chose for them. Marco Malaponte. Okay, the first one is called A New Man in the House. A butler comes into a house of a rich banker, gets hired, starts having an affair with the banker's daughter. I'm guessing that the plot from this was stolen from the classic 1930s screwball comedy, My Man Godfrey. It's almost the same plot, and it's really the only thing I can think of where a butler is the romantic hero. The plot's very thin. Does have a conclusion. Does have a kind of noirish take to it. You could have done this as a straight novel. It's 100 pages, and they're interesting if you're interested in this kind of paperback sleaze of the 1960s. According to the Malmsberg afterword for the first story, this was right after the case was won, the censorship case against Lady Chatterley's lover. The D.H. Lawrence novel was won in the United States, so a lot of quickie paperback companies came up, and they were doing these kind of softcore erotica books, trying to cash in. He mentioned some stuff. He mentioned a book by Donald Westlake called Adios Scheherazade, or Goodbye Scheherazade, or something like that, about what it was like to be one of these hacks, banging out these books for $500 or $1,000 per 200-page book. In addition to trying to make the writers doing it, like Westlake and Malzberg and Lawrence Block and others, trying to do that, to keep the wolf from the door. At the same time, they're still trying to write develop their own crime series and things like that. But Peter Rabe was not one of those guys. He was an older writer who had fallen on hard times. He had a very uneven career, which ended up with him writing this kind of stuff. Then he did a couple TV novelizations from the Mannix TV series and that. But his most famous books are The Box and a book called Kill the Boss Goodbye, which I've got but I haven't read yet. You can see he's not the best at titling books. The box has got to be, I always think it's called The Crate. I'm always surprised when I look it up again. It's called The Box, which has got to be the dullest title for any book ever written. The Box. It might be a better title for a horror novel or a horror story or something, but it's really a bad title. And Kill the Boss Goodbye just sounds like a parody. Sounds like something you would make up for Mickey Spillane novel or not. But apparently it's a very good book, so I want to read that. So that's how I ended Garbaugust, with those trashy books, which definitely by anybody's account qualify as garbage, I would think, even by Peter Rabe's account. I think there was things he probably enjoyed in that. There is a story of a sort. Like I say, it was stolen from my man Godfrey. It's a pretty good twist at the end when we find out what kind of person the butler really is. And the other one's kind of the reverse. Instead of an older man, younger woman, trashy porn. It's called Her High School Lover. It's about a unhappy, as they would say in the 60s, unfulfilled housewife who doesn't like whose husband is cheating on her or something, so she has an affair with her son's friend, I think, is what happens in it. I haven't read it, but so I can't recommend them, but they are definitely Garbaugust books. So I thought I intended to, where are we at? I guess I can talk a few minutes. I wanted to talk about my reflections on Garbaugust altogether. I did have a good time doing it. I don't think I learned anything, which is probably not the point of Garbaugust, but I did, when I started out, I had some questions in my own mind about what constitutes garbage, enjoyable garbage, and I had fun reading all the books I read, even this Man of the House book, because even though it's a bit sad, it's be more amusing if it was like a 20-something writer who's just banging out whatever he can. It's a bit sad to think of an older writer, scraping together, just having to scrape for scraps, having to beg for scraps and do this kind of trashy work. But it is what it is. It was a very tough life. There's a couple. I want to read that Goodbye Scheherazade book by Donald Westlake, and another book called, which is an older book about a different era, which is often comes up when pulp writers and hack writers and those kind of things are talked about, called New Grub Street, which is about being a hack writer in a much earlier era. I don't even want to say. I can't remember if it was the 1880s or the 1920s. That's how vague I am on it. So I should probably just read that book before I talk about it. But that's the kind of that's one thread of the books that or writers that come into mind when you're thinking of Garbaugust, and that's why we love it. We love our Garbaugust. And I read a lot of novelizations, which I've really never read, which I used to read a lot as a teenager and a preteen, when they were around, because there'd be movies you couldn't see. Or I remember one of the first ones I read was Zardoz, because there was no way I was going to ever get to see Zardoz. And I did enjoy that book. I didn't see the movie till later when I was an adult, because it's not a movie appropriate for kids. But it's funny because they would let you read these books that are based on movies that had ratings you would never be allowed into. Zardoz was pretty cool at the time. It's got some I'm distracted by all these people determined to kill each other out here in the rain. I did see one wreck before I started. Interesting solution to a car wreck. There was 2 cars banged into each other. One ripped the front off the other car. I didn't see whose fault it was. Probably both of them, because they're both driving through the intersection in a downpour at normal speed, and they got out and they yelled at each other for a couple minutes, and then they both drove off, because really there's no point in waiting for the police, and who knows what the insurance situation is like here. But it's a lot more it's not the same as the United States or Western Europe, I'll say. So I think both people realize, as bad as it was, nobody was hurt. They both take care of their own expenses, not have to deal with anything, not have to deal with the government or bureaucracy or the cops or the court system, whatever. So it ended, after like 5 minutes, it was all done, instead of being taken up the next 6 months of their lives. So that's maybe a way to handle it. I'm just glad I'm not out walking on the street now, because people are really zipping along. What was I talking about? So I did all those Planet of the Apes videos and Ghostbusters novelization videos. For those, I learned that really no one's interested in hearing about Planet of the Apes or Ghostbusters from me, it's fine. I still got like 4 books. I did watch a bunch of Planet of the Apes stuff. I guess I'll talk about if I ever talk about the books, or if I ever get around to reading them, because they're not on the top of my pile anymore. I think there's an ape event, isn't there? If somebody knows, isn't there an ape event in March or April? April? Is that still a thing? I'm gonna have to research that, or maybe they just did that one year. That'd be something I could read for all those other 8 books I got, but I won't subject you to any more novelization stuff. It's just like a thing that went by the wayside. That's really not that important to that many people anymore. Probably doesn't even make a lot of sense, for people who are born in the either the current streaming era or the hard media era, when you could actually own video cassettes and then later discs and Blu-rays of movies. It's something like doesn't really seem to have a place in the world anymore, because you can have the actual movie, watch it at home. You don't have to read a often very mediocre transcription novelization of a screenplay turned into prose, mediocre prose often, although a couple of those Planet of the Apes ones were pretty good. I would say the Jerry Pournelle one particularly was well written, and that was Escape from the Planet of the Apes, was it? And I don't know what you want to wrote. And the David Gerrold one, Conquest from Planet of the Apes, was pretty well written too. Of all that stuff, I'd say, just watch the first 4 movies. Forget the TV series. Forget the 5th movie. And I'm done with those movies now. And I did watch the series, because I've got novelizations of the series left to read. But I'm not going to do any of the new ones, the Andy Serkis ones or anything like that. What else? I guess that's what it was. I did focus pretty much on Garbaugust for all my reading. for the last month. See if there's anything else I read that I could talk about. I might as well keep going on here because this is going up, in the middle of Labor Day weekend, so most people probably are not going to be watching a lot of YouTube, so I can just indulge myself. But where is my list of books that I read for the month? I just felt like doing one today because I haven't done one in a few days because I had all these banked ones. Okay, so I read... See, I can't go outside. I'd kind of like to go out and do grocery shopping, but I don't want to go out because I think there's going to be another downpour soon. Although it's pretty light right now, people haven't really ventured out yet. The beach is empty. The street vendors all packed up because they know that nobody's coming back to the beach today. I read looks like I read. Okay, I finished last month with Pride and Prejudice, and I tried to read Little Women. Couldn't read it. Couldn't finish it. I read Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross, the graphic novel about the future end of the DC universe. I didn't like it at all. It was really nothing of a story. I read Aretha Stars by Bob Shaw. I talked about that before. Great SF writer Bob Shaw that I discovered this month. I read early Ray Bradbury collection from Megapacks. It just turned out later I found out it's 14 stories. They're all 14 are available on Project Gutenberg. It's just a collection of all the out of copyright Ray Bradbury stuff from Planet Stories. Interesting though, if you're a Planet of the Apes, and see, still got Planet of the Apes in the brain. Stay away from the Planet of the Apes; it'll take over your life. Bradbury stories. Anyway, and then I read The Weirdos, Larry Kent, number 799, by Don Herring. I talked about that last year. Search my channel for Larry Kent if you're interested. And I read all the Brack the Barbarian novels. Those are pretty good. If you're a sword and sorcery junkie, and you've read all the Conan and all the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser and all the C.L. Moore and who else? The Joanna Russ. She has a good The Adventures of Alex by Joanna Russ. You read all that good stuff, and you've read. Then go to Garner Fox with his Kothar books, and go to John Jakes with his Brack books. And just glad I read those. I got some other John Jakes on the pile too. Then all the Planet of the Apes stuff. 2 Ed Lacey novels, Strip for Violence and Blonde Bait. He's one of my new favorites now, and I think I turned at least one person onto him, so Faceless. I hope you'll do a review of the one you read and let me know how you're getting along with Ed Lacey books. Then Planet of the Apes. I read Ask Not. That was my nonfiction. Garbaugust, a book about how the Kennedy family treated the women, both inside the family and around the family. Murdered Home, ghost crime novel written for the actor George Saunders. Sanctuary, Star Trek novel by John Vornholt. Very good classic, old-fashioned Star Trek. If you like Kirk, Spock, and McCoy kind of stuff, that's one to read. Then that was it. Three Hearts and Three Lions, a Poul Anderson book. I read because it's going to tie in with something that I thought it was going to tie in. It really doesn't tie in, but with a book I'm going to read for Shaketober. Three Hearts, Three Lions, really good Poul Anderson book. I've never read much Poul Anderson growing up or anything. Last year I read his book, The Broken Sword, fantastic fantasy novel based on kind of Scandinavian epics, sagas, Icelandic sagas kind of thing. And Three Hearts and Three Lions, along with Broken Sword, are a couple that Michael Moorcock always credits for influencing him in his own sword and sorcery work. Three Hearts and Three Lions is kind of the typical setup of one typical setup of fantasy novels, particularly the kind before Tolkien, which was a guy who's a modern person, a la sort of in a manner of Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court. A modern person wakes up in the past, or in a fantasy world. This guy is this is in the era of World War One, or was it World War Two? I think it's World War One. It's been a couple weeks. He's in the middle of he's a engineer, and he's in the middle of a dicey situation in a war zone. Wakes up as a knight in a fantasy landscape inspired by the Fairy Queen, Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen. And there's no explanation for any of this, why he's there, anything. He knows it's something going on because the armor fits him perfectly, even though he's much taller than the local people and all that. And it's a great sword and sorcery adventure, great fantasy adventure, I should say. I guess it's kind of sword and sorcery. So I really like that a lot. Growing up, I only knew Poul Anderson as a science fiction writer, but he did write a fair amount of fantasy, which I found much more interesting than the science fiction of his I tried to read in the past. So there are a couple more I want to read by him. They're easy to find now because who's ever taken care of his estate is doing a good job of bringing all his books out. So there's that. I guess that's it for Garbaugust. I always hate to say goodbye to Garbaugust, but you can always read garbage anytime. It's pretty much the same stuff I always read. So what I'm in the middle of now is I'm going to read the second half of this Peter Rabe book. I'm in the middle of a collection of stories by, where I lost that one, by Jack Ritchie, who's a great mystery writer. I might do it. Jack Ritchie has two collections out, A New Leaf, which I talked about before, and the other one he's got out is The Best of Manhunt number 5. Stark House publishes these anthologies of stories from Manhunt magazine from the 50s, which is a short-lived magazine in the style of like Alfred Hitchcock's or Ellery Queen, which are still around today, or the Saint magazine, which was around that time too. I think there was one more. One more Private Eye had his own digest-sized mystery magazine. Saint, Hitchcock, Ellery Queen, Manhunt. Mike Shane. Mike Shane was another one. So there were 3 that were popular in the 50s that people still look back on fondly. That's Manhunt, The Saint, and Mike Shane. So Stark House has a series of Best of Manhunts. For the 4th installment of the series, they decided to do all stories by Jack Ritchie because he's a very prolific writer. Some of these are a bit harder edged than the ones in New Leaf. New Leaf was a collection he put out himself when he was still alive, so might have been more of his best stuff. Some of the stuff is pretty raw. Some of it's kind of rough. A couple stories I'm not quite sure what happened even. There's some of the borderline horror stories. Borderline in the sense that, it used to be a thing a lot of writers would do, and a lot of anthologies on TV and radio, and that were, it's really up to you to decide whether anything supernatural happened or if it was all in the character's imagination. You could say that about a lot of horror stories. I have my own opinion on The Turn of the Screw, for example, which I've been thinking about. I thought about a lot this week. I don't know why. It came into my head. It's really so well written, and that'll be my recommendation if you don't know what to read for Shorty September. You could read The Turn of the Screw or Daisy Miller, both by Henry James, if you want to read a classic. Turn of the Screw is really good. And now we're getting more lightning and thunder, so I guess that's a good place to wrap it up. I enjoyed Garbaugust. Let me know if you enjoyed Garbaugust, if you participate in these events, if you care about them or not. If you read anything for Garbaugust that you wouldn't have read normally, please, as always, like and subscribe. If you already subscribed, please open a few dummy accounts and subscribe them as well. That always helps out the algorithm because it's all about the numbers. And it's been nice talking to you. See you next month.